Welcome to the series where I try to read every book in Skyrim. This series is made up of edited VODs from my Twitch channel where I've been streaming my attempts to read every book in Skyrim. As such, there may be a few errors sprinkled in here and there. My apologies for those errors, and I hope that you enjoy regardless. Thank you. 2920 Morning Star, Volume 1. Morning Star, Book 1 of 2920, The Last Year of the First Era, by Karlovac Townway. First Morning Star 2920, Mournhold Morrowind. Almalexia lay in her bed of fur, dreaming. Not until the sun burned through her window, infusing the light wood and flesh colors of her chamber in a milky glow, did she open her eyes. It was quiet and serene, a stunning reverse of the flavor of her dreams, so full of blood and celebration. For a few moments, she simply stared at the ceiling, trying to sort through her visions. In the courtyard of her palace was a boiling pool which steamed in the coolness of the winter morning. At the wave of her hand, it cleared, and she saw the face and form of her lover Vivek in his study to the north. She did not want to speak right away. He looked so handsome in his dark red robes, writing his poetry as he did every morning. Vivek, she said, and he raised his head in a smile, looking at her face across thousands of miles. I have seen a vision of the end of the war. After 80 years, I don't think anyone can imagine an end, said Vivek with a smile, but he grew serious, trusting Almalexia's prophecies. Who will win, Morrowind or the Cyrodiilic Empire? Without Sothasil in Morrowind, we will lose, she replied. My intelligence tells me the Empire will strike us to the north in early springtide, by first seed at the latest. Could you go to Artaeum and convince him to return? I'll leave today, she said simply. 4 Morning Star 2920, Gideon Blackmarsh. The Empress paced around her cell. Wintertide gave her wasteful energy, while in the summer she would merely sit by her window and be grateful for each breath of stale swamp wind that came to cool her. Across the room, her unfinished tapestry of a dance at the Imperial Court seemed to mock her. She ripped it from its frame, tearing the pieces apart as they drifted to the floor. Then she laughed at her own useless gesture of defiance. She would have plenty of time to repair it and craft 100 more. The Emperor had locked her up in Castle Geoves 7 years ago, and would likely keep her here until he or she died. With a sigh, she pulled the cord to call her knight. Zook. He appeared at the door within minutes, fully uniformed as befitted an Imperial Guard. Most of the native Kothringi tribesmen of Blackmarsh preferred to go about naked, but Zook had taken a positive delight to fashion. His silver, reflective skin was scarcely visible, only on his face, neck, and hands. Your Imperial Highness, he said with a bow. Zook, said Empress Tavia. I'm bored. Let's discuss methods of assassinating my husband today. 14 Morning Star 2920, The Imperial City, Cyrodiil. The chimes proclaiming Southwind's prayer echoed through the wide boulevards and gardens of the Imperial City, calling all to their temples. The Emperor Riemann III always attended a service at the Temple of the One, while his son and heir, Prince Julik, found it more political to attend a service at a different temple for each religious holiday. This year, it was at the Cathedral Benevolence of Mara. The Benevolence's services were mercifully short, but it was not until well after noon that the Emperor was able to return to the palace. By then, the arena combatants were impatiently waiting for the start of the ceremony. The crowd was far less restless, as the potentate Verzidu Shai had arranged for a demonstration from a troupe of Khajiiti acrobats. Your religion is so much more convenient than mine, said the Emperor to his potentate, by way of an apology. What is the first game? A one-on-one battle between 2 able warriors, said the potentate, his scaly skin catching the sun as he rose. Armed befitting their culture. Sounds good, said the Emperor and clapped his hands. Let the sport commence. As soon as he saw the 2 warriors enter the arena to the roar of the crowd, Emperor Riemann III remembered that he had agreed to this several months before and forgotten about it. One combatant was the potentate's son, Severian Chorak, a glistening ivory yellow eel, gripping his katana and wakizashi with his thin, deceptively weak-looking arms. The other was the Emperor's son, Prince Julek, in ebony armor with a savage orcish helm, shield and longsword at his side. "This will be fascinating to watch," hissed the potentate, a wide grin across his narrow face. "I don't know I've ever seen Cyrodiil fight on Akavir like this. Usually it's army against army. At last we can settle which philosophy is better, to create armor to combat swords, as your people do, or to create swords to combat armor, as mine do." No one in the crowd, aside from a few scattered Akaviri counselors and the potentate himself, wanted Severa and Chorak to win. But there was a collective intake of breath at the sight of his graceful movements. His sword seemed to be a part of him, a tail coming from his arms to match the one behind him. It was a trick of counterbalance, allowing the young serpent man to roll up into a circle and spin into the center of the ring in offensive position. The prince had to plod forward the less impressive traditional way. As they sprang at each other, the crowd bellowed with delight. The Akaviri was like a moon in orbit around the prince, effortlessly springing over his shoulder to attempt a blow from behind, but the prince whirled around quickly to block with his shield. His counter-strike met only air as his foe fell flat to the ground and slithered between his legs, tripping him. The prince fell to the ground with a resounding crash. Metal and air melted together as Severian Chorak rained strike after strike upon the prince, who blocked every one with his shield. "We don't have shields in our culture," murmured Versidue Shai to the emperor. "It seems strange to my boy, I imagine. In our country, if you don't want to get hit, you move out of the way." When Severian Chorak was rearing back to begin another series of blinding attacks, the prince kicked at his tail, sending him falling back momentarily. In an instant he had rebounded, but the prince was also back on his feet. The two circled one another until the snake man spun forward, katana extended. The prince saw his foe's plan, and blocked the katana with his longsword, and the wakizashi with his shield. Its short punching blade impaled itself in the metal, and Severian Chorak was thrown off balance. The prince's long blade slashed across the Akavir's chest, and the sudden, intense pain caused him to drop both his weapons. In a moment, it was over. Severian Chorak was prostrate in the dust, with the prince's longsword at his throat. "The game is over," shouted the emperor, barely heard over the applause from the stadium. The prince grinned and helped Severian Chorak up and over to a healer. The emperor clapped his potentate on the back, feeling relieved. He had not realized when the fight had begun how little chance he had given his son at victory. "He will make a fine warrior," said Versidue Shai. "And a great emperor." "Just remember," laughed the emperor, "you Akaviri have a lot of showy moves, but if just one of our strikes comes through, it's all over for you." "Oh, I'll remember that," nodded the potentate. Raymond thought about that comment for the rest of the games and had trouble fully enjoying himself. Could the potentate be another enemy, just as the empress had turned out to be? The matter would bear watching. 21st Morning Star 2920, Mournhold, Morrowind. "Why don't you wear that green gown I gave you?" asked the Duke of Mournhold, watching the young maiden put on her clothes. "It doesn't fit," smiled Tarala. "And you know I like red." "It doesn't fit because you're getting fat," laughed the Duke, pulling her down on the bed, kissing her breasts and the pouch of her stomach. She laughed at the tickles and pulled herself up, wrapping her red robe around her. "I'm round like a woman should be," said Tarala. "Will I see you tomorrow?" "No," said the Duke. "I must entertain Vivek tomorrow, and the next day the Duke of Ebonheart is coming." "Do you know, I never really appreciated Alexia and her political skills until she left." "It is the same with me," smiled Tarala. "You will only appreciate me when I'm gone." "That's not true at all," snorted the Duke. "I appreciate you now." Tarala allowed the Duke one last kiss before she was out the door. She kept thinking about what he said. Would he appreciate her more or less when he knew that she was getting fat because she was carrying his child? Would he appreciate her enough to marry her? The year continues and suns dawn. That was 2920 Morning Star, Volume 1. This is 2920 Sun's Dawn, Volume 2. Sun's Dawn, Book 2 of 2920, The Last Year of the First Era, by Karlovac Townway. Third Sun's Dawn 2920, The Isle of Artaeum, Somerset. So Thistle watched the initiates float one by one up to the awasum tree, taking a fruit or a flower from its high branches before dropping back to the ground with varying degrees of grace. He took a moment while nodding his head in approval to admire the day. The whitewashed statue of Sirabane, which the great mage was said to have posed for in ancient days, stood at the precipice of the cliff overlooking the bay. Pale purple prosciutto flowers waves to and fro in the gentle blue breeze. Beyond, ocean and the misty border between Artaeum and the main island of Somerset. By and large acceptable, he proclaimed, as the last student dropped her fruit in his hand. With a wave of his hand, the fruit and flowers were back in the tree. With another wave, the students had formed into position a semicircle around the sorcerer. He pulled a small fibrous ball, about a foot in diameter, from his white robes. What is this? The students understood this test. It asked them to cast a spell of identification on the mysterious object. Each initiate closed his or her eyes and imagined the ball in the realm of the universal truth. Its energy had a unique resonance, as all physical and spiritual matter does. A negative aspect, a duplicate version, relative paths, true meaning, a song in the cosmos, a texture in the fabric of space, a facet of being that has always existed and always will exist. A ball, said a young Nord named Wellig, which brought giggles from some of the younger initiates, but a frown from most, including Sothasil. If you must be stupid, at least be amusing, growled the sorcerer, and then looked at a young, dark-haired Altmer lass, who looked confused. Lilatha, do you know? It's Grom, said Lilatha, uncertainly. What the Drug meth after they've Carvanasum, but very good nonetheless, said Sothasil. Now tell me, what does that mean? I don't know, admitted Lilatha. The rest of the students also shook their head. There are layers to understanding all things, said Sothasil. The common man looks at an object and fits it into a place in his way of thinking. Those skilled in the old ways, in the ways of the Sijic, in mysticism, can see an object and identify it by its proper role. But one more layer is needed to be peeled back to achieve understanding. You must identify the object by its role and its truth and interpret that meaning. In this case, this ball is indeed Grom, which is a substance secreted by the Drug, an underwater race in the north and western parts of the continent. For 1 year of their life, they undergo Carvanasum when they walk upon the land. Following that, they return to the water and meth, or devour the skin and organs they needed for land dwelling. Then they vomited up into little balls like this. Grom, Drug vomit. The students looked at the ball a little queasily. Sothasil always loved this lesson. 4th of Sun's Dawn, 2920, the Imperial City, Cyrodiil. Spies, muttered the Emperor, sitting on his bath, staring at a lump on his foot. All around me, traitors and spies. His mistress, Rija, watched his back, her legs wrapped around his waist. She knew after all these many years when to be sensual and when to be sexual. When he was in a mood like this, it was best to be calmly, soothingly, seductively sensual, and not to say a word unless he asked her a direct question, which he did. What do you think when a fellow steps on his Imperial Majesty's foot and says, "I'm sorry, Your Imperial Majesty"? Don't you think, "Pardon me, Your Imperial Majesty," is more appropriate? I'm sorry, well that sounds like the bastard Argonian was sorry I am his Imperial Majesty. That he hopes we lose the war with Morrowind, and that's what it sounds like. What would make you feel better? Asked Rija. Would you like him flogged? He is only, as you say, the battle chief of Soul Rest. It would teach him to mind where he's stepping. My father would have flogged him. My grandfather would have had him killed, the Emperor grumbled. But I don't mind if they all step on my feet, provided they respect me and don't plot against me. You must trust someone. Only you, smiled the Emperor, turning slightly to give Rija a kiss. My son Julik, I suppose, though I wish he were a little more cautious. And your counsel in the potentate? Asked Rita. A pack of spies and a snake, laughed the Emperor, kissing his mistress again. As they began to make love, he whispered, As long as you're true, I can handle the world. 13 Sun's Dawn 2920, Mournhold Morrowind. Torala stood at the black, bejeweled city gates. A wind howled around her, but she felt nothing. The Duke had been furious upon hearing his favorite mistress was pregnant, and cast her from his sight. She tried again and again to see him, but his guards turned her away. Finally, she returned to her family and told them the truth. If only she had lied and told them she did not know who the father was. A soldier, a wandering adventurer, anyone. But she told them that the father was the Duke, a member of the house in Doral. And they did what she knew they would have to do, as proud members of the House Redoran. Upon her hand was burned the sign of expulsion her weeping father had branded on her. But the Duke's cruelty hurt her far more. She looked out the gate and into the wider winter plains, twisted, sleeping trees and skies without birds. No one in Morrowind would take her in now. She must go far away. With slow, sad steps, she began her journey. 16 Sun's Dawn 2920, Sunshell and Aquina, modern day elsewhere. What troubles you? Asked Queen Hasama, noticing her husband's sour mood. At the end of most lovers' days, he was in an excellent mood, dancing in the ballroom with all the guests. But tonight he retired early. When she found him, he was curled in the bed, frowning. That blasted bard's tale about Polydor and Eloisa put me in a rotten state, he growled. Why did he have to be so depressing? But isn't that the truth of the tale, my dear? Weren't they doomed because of the cruel nature of the world? It doesn't matter what the truth is. He did a rotten job of telling a rotten tale, and I'm not going to let him do it anymore. King Drozel sprang from the bed. His eyes were roomy with tears. Where did they say he was from again? I believe Gilverdale, in easternmost Valenwood, said the Queen, shaken. My husband, what are you going to do? Drozel was out the room in a single spring, bounding up the stairs to his tower. If Queen Hasama knew what her husband was going to do, she did not try to stop him. He had been erratic of late, prone to fits and even occasional seizures, but she never suspected the depths of his madness, and his loathing for the bard and his tale of wickedness and perversity found in mortal men. "19 Sun's Dawn 2920, Gilverdale, Valenwood. Listen to me again, said the old carpenter. If cell 3 holds worthless brass, then cell 2 holds the gold key. If cell 1 holds the gold key, then cell 3 holds worthless brass. If cell 2 holds worthless brass, then cell 1 holds the gold key. I understand, said the lady. You told me. And so cell 1 holds the gold key, right? No, said the carpenter. Let me start from the top. Mama, said the little boy, pulling on his mother's sleeve. Just one moment, dear. Mother's talking, she said, concentrating on the riddle. You said cell 3 holds the golden key if cell 2 holds worthless brass, right? No, said the carpenter patiently. Cell 3 holds worthless brass if cell 2... Mama, cried the boy. His mother finally looked. A bright red mist was pouring over the town in a wave, engulfing building after building in its wake. Striding before was a red-skinned giant, the Daedra Malegval. He was smiling. 29 Sun's Dawn 2920, Gilverdale, Valenwood. Almalexia stopped her steed in the vast moor of mud to let him drink from the river. He refused to, even seemed repelled by the water. It struck her as odd. They had been making excellent time from Mournhold, and surely he must be thirsty. She dismounted and joined her retinue. Where are we now? She asked. One of her ladies pulled out a map. I thought we were approaching a town called Gilverdale. Almalexia closed her eyes and opened them again quickly. The vision was too much to bear. As her followers watched, she picked up a piece of brick and fragment of bone and clutched them to her heart. We must continue on to Artaeum, she said quietly. The year continues in First Seed. That was 2920 Sun's Dawn, Volume 2. Next up is 2920 First Seed, Volume 3. First Seed, Book 3 of 2920, The Last Year of the First Era, by Karlovac Tenway. 15 First Seed 2920, Caer Suvio, Cyrodiil. From their vantage point high in the hills, the Emperor Riemann III could still see the spires of the imperial city, but he knew he was far away from hearth and home. Lord Glavius had a luxurious villa, but it was not close to being large enough to house the entire army within its walls. Tents lined the hillsides, and the soldiers were flocking to enjoy his lordship's famous hot springs. Little wonder winter chill still hung in the air. Prince Drulek, your son, is not feeling well. When Potentate Versidu Shai spoke, the Emperor jumped. How that Akavir could slither across the grass without making a sound was a mystery to him. Poisoned, I'd wager, grumbled Riemann. See to it he gets a healer. I told him to hire a taster like I have, but the boy's headstrong. There are spies all around us, I know it. I believe you're right, your Imperial Majesty, said Versidu Shai. These are treacherous times, and we must take precautions to see that Morrowind does not win this war, either on the field or by more insidious means. That is why I would suggest that you not lead the vanguard into battle. I know you would want to, as your illustrious ancestors Riemann I, Brasilis Dor, and Riemann II did, but I fear it would be foolhardy. I hope you do not mind me speaking frankly like this. No, nodded Riemann. I think you're right. Who would lead the vanguard then? I would say Prince Drulek, if he were feeling better, replied the Akavir. Failing that, Stora Gafarin, with Queen Nagia of Riverhold at left flank, and War Chief Ulakth of Lilmuth at right flank. A Khajiit at left flank and an Argonian at right, frowned the Emperor. I never do trust beast folk. The Potentate took no offense. He knew that beast folk referred to the natives of Tamriel, not to the Seiski of Akavir like himself. I quite agree with your Imperial Majesty, but you must agree that they hate the Dunmer. Ulakth has a particular grudge after all the slave raids on his lands by the Duke of Mournhold. The Emperor conceded it was so, and the Potentate retired. It was surprising, thought Riemann, but for the first time the Potentate seemed trustworthy. He was a good man to have at one's side. 18 First Seed 2920, Alt Urfud, Morrowind. How far is the Imperial Army? Asked Vivek. 2 days' march, replied his lieutenant. If we march all night tonight, we can get high ground at the Priere tomorrow morning. Our intelligence tells us the Emperor will be commanding the rear, Stora Gafarin as the vanguard, Nagia of Riverhold at left flank, and Ulakth of Lilmoth at right flank. Ulakth, whispered Vivek, an idea forming. Is this intelligence reliable? Who brought it to us? A Breton spy in the Imperial Army, said the lieutenant, and gestured towards a young, sandy-haired man who stepped forward and bowed to Vivek. What is your name, and why is Breton working for us against the Cyrodiils? Asked Vivek, smiling. My name is Cassier Whitley of Dwinnen, said the man, and I am working for you because not everyone can say he spied for a god. And I understand it would be, well, profitable. Vivek laughed. It will be, if your information is accurate. 19 First Seed 2920, Bodrum's Morrowind. The quiet hamlet of Bodrum looked down on the meandering river, the Prai. It was an idyllic sight, lightly wooded where the water took the bend around a steep bluff to the east, with a gorgeous wildflower meadow to the west. The strange flora of Morrowind met the strange flora of Cyrodiil on the border and commingled gloriously. There will be time to sleep when you've finished. Soldiers had been hearing that all morning. It was not enough that they had been marching all night. Now they are chopping down trees on the bluff and damming the river so its water spilled over. Most of them had reached the point where they were too tired to complain about being tired. Let me be certain I understand, my lord, said Vivek's lieutenant. We take the bluff so we can fire arrows and spells down on them from above. That's why we need all the trees cleared out. Damming the river floods the plains below. So they'll be trudging through mud, which should hamper their movement. That's exactly half of it, said Vivek approvingly. He grabbed a nearby soldier who was hauling off the trees. Wait. I need you to break off the straightest, strongest branches of the trees and whittle them into spears. If you recruit 100 or so others, it won't take you more than a few hours to make all we need." The soldier wearily did as was bade. The men and women got to work fashioning spears from the trees. "If you don't mind me asking," said the lieutenant, "soldiers don't need any more weapons. They're too tired to hold the ones they've got." "These spears aren't for holding," said Vivek and whispered. "If we tired them out today, they'll get a good night's sleep tonight." Before he got to work supervising their work. It was essential that they be sharp, of course, but equally important that they be well balanced and tapered proportionally. The perfect point for stability was a pyramid, not the conical point of some lances and spears. He had the men hurl the spears they had completed to test their strength, sharpness, and balance, forcing them to begin on a new one if they broke. Gradually, out of sheer exhaustion from doing it wrong, the men learned how to create the perfect wooden spears. Once they were through, he showed them how they were to be arranged and where. That night, there was no drunken pre-battle carousing, and no nervous neophytes stayed up worrying about the battle to come. As soon as the sun sank beneath the wooded hills, the camp was at rest, but for the sentries. 21st C, 2920, Bodrum Morrowind. Miramor was exhausted. For the last 6 days, he had gambled and whored all night, and then marched all day. He was looking forward to the battle, but even more than that, he was looking forward to some rest afterwards. He was in the Emperor's command at the rear flank, which was good because it seemed unlikely that he would be killed. On the other hand, it meant traveling over the mud and waste the army ahead left in their wake. As they began the trek through the wildflower field, Miramor and all the soldiers around him sank ankle-deep into the cold mud. It was an effort to even keep moving. Far, far up ahead, he could see the vanguard of the army, led by Lord Storig, emerging from the meadow at the base of a bluff. That was when it all happened. An army of Dunmer appeared above the bluff like rising Daedra, pouring fire and flood of arrows down on the vanguard. Simultaneously, a company of men bearing the flag of the Duke of Mournhold galloped around the shore, disappearing along the shallow river's edge, where it dipped to a timbered glen to the east. War Chief Ulach, nearby on the right flank, let out a bellow of revenge at the sight and gave chase. Queen Nagia sent her flank towards the embankment to the west to intercept the army on the bluff. The Emperor could think of nothing to do. His troops were too bogged down to move forward quickly and join the battle. He ordered them to face east towards the timber, in case Mournhold's company was trying to circle around through the woods. They never came out, but many men facing west missed the battle entirely. Miramor kept his eyes on the bluff. A tall Dunmer he supposed must have been Vivek, gave a signal, and the battle mages cast their spell at something to the west. From what transpired, Miramor deduced was a dam. A great torrent of water spilled out, washing Nagia's left flank into the remains of the vanguard, and the two together down the river to the east. The Emperor paused as if waiting for his vanquished army to return, and then called a retreat. Miramor hid in the rushes until they had passed by, and then waited as quietly as he could to the bluff. The Morrowind army was retiring as well back to their camp. He could hear them celebrating above him as he padded along the shore. To the east, he saw the Imperial army. They had been washed into a net of spears strung across the river. Nagia's left flank, on Storig's vanguard, on Ulach's right flank, bodies of hundreds of soldiers strung together like beads. Miramor took whatever valuables he could carry from the corpses and then ran down the river. He had to go many miles before the water was clear again, unpolluted by blood. 29 1st C, 2920, Hegalth Hammerfell. "You have a letter from the Imperial City," said the chief priestess, handing the parchment to Corda. All the young priestesses smiled and made faces of astonishment. But the truth was that Corda's sister, Rija, wrote very often, at least once a month. Corda took the letter to the garden to read it, her favorite place, an oasis in the monochromatic sand-colored world of the conservatorium. The letter itself was nothing unusual, filled with court gossip, the latest fashions which were tending to wine-dark velvets, and reports of the Emperor's ever-growing paranoia. "You are so lucky to be away from all of this," wrote Rija. "The Emperor is convinced that his latest battlefield fiasco is all a result of spies in the palace. He has even taken to questioning me. Ruptka kept it so you never have a life as interesting as mine." Corda listened to the sounds of the desert and prayed to Ruptka the exact opposite wish. The years continued. in Rain's hand. That was 2920 for Seed, Volume. 2920, Rain's Hand, Volume 4. Rain's Hand, Book 4 of 2920, The Last Year of the First Era, by Karlovac Townway. Third Rain's Hand, 2920, Cold Harbor, Oblivion. Sothasil proceeded as quickly as he could through the blackened halls of the palace, half submerged in brackish water. All around him, nasty gelatinous creatures scurried into the reeds, bursts of white fire lit up the upper arches of the hall before disappearing, and smells assaulted him, rancid death one moment, sweet-flowered perfume the next. Several times he had visited the Daedra princes in their oblivion, but every time something different awaited him. He knew his purpose and refused to be distracted. 8 of the more prominent Daedra princes were awaiting him in the half-melted, domed room. Azura, Prince of Dusk and Dawn, Boethia, Prince of Plots, Hermamora, Daedra of Knowledge, Kircine the Hunter, Malakath, God of Curses, Mehrunes Dagon, Prince of Disaster, Molag Bal, Prince of Rage, Sheogorath, the Mad One. Above them, the sky cast tormented shadows upon the meeting. 5th of Rain's Hand, 2920, The Isle of Artaeum, Somerset. Sothasil's voice cried out, echoing from the cave, "Move the rock." Immediately, the initiates obeyed, rolling aside the great boulder that blocked the entrance to the dreaming cavern. Sothasil emerged, his face smeared with ash, weary. He felt he had been away for months, years, but only a few days had transpired. Lilatha took his arm to help him walk, but he refused her help with a kind smile and a shake of his head. "Were you successful?" she asked. "The Daedra princes I spoke with have agreed to our terms," he said flatly. "Disasters such as befell Gilverdale should be averted. Only through certain intermediaries, such as witches or sorcerers, they will answer the call of man and Mer." "And what did you promise them in return?" asked Nordboy Wellig. "The deals we make with Daedra," said Sothasil, continuing onto Iachis's palace to meet with the master of the Psijic Order, "should not be discussed with the innocent. With the innocent. 8th of Rain's Hand, 2920, The Imperial City, Cyrodiil. A storm billeted the windows of the prince's bedchamber, bringing a smell of moist air to mix with the censers filled with burning incense and herbs. "A letter has arrived from the Empress, your mother," said the courier, anxiously inquiring after your health. "What frightened parents I have," laughed Prince Julek from his bed. "It is only natural for a mother to worry," said Severian Chorak, the potentate's son. "There is everything unnatural about my family, Akavir. My exiled mother fears that my father will imagine me of being a traitor, covetous of the crown, and is having me poisoned." The prince sank back into his pillow, annoyed. "The Emperor insisted on me having a taster for all my meals as he does." "There are many plots," agreed the Akavir. "You have been abed for nearly 3 weeks, with every healer in the Empire shuffling through like a slow ballroom dance." "At least all can see that you're getting stronger." "Strong enough to lead the vanguard against Morrowind soon, I hope," said Julek. 11th of Rain's Hand, 2920, The Isle of Artaeum, Somerset. 11th of Rain's Hand, 2920, The Isle of Artaeum, Somerset. The initiates stood quietly in a row along the Arbor Iogia, watching the long, deep, marble-lined trench ahead of them flash with fire. The air above it vibrated with the waves of heat. Though each student kept his or her face sturdy and emotionless, as a true Psijic should, their terror was nearly as palpable as the heat. Sothasil closed his eyes and uttered the charm of fire resistance. Slowly, he walked across the basin of leaping flames, climbing to the other side unscathed. Not even his white robe had been burned. "The charm is intensified by the energy you bring to it, by your own skills, just as all spells are," he said. "Your imagination and your willpower are the keys. There is no need for a spell to give you a resistance to air or resistance to flowers, and after you cast the charm, you must forget there is even a need for a spell to give you resistance to fire. Do not confuse what I am saying. Resistance is not about ignoring the fire's reality. You will feel the substance of the flame, the texture of it, its hunger, and even the heat of it, but you will know that it will not hurt or injure you." The students nodded, and one by one they cast the spell and made the walk through the fire. Some even went so far as to bend over and scoop up a handful of fire and feed it air so it expanded like a bubble and melted through their fingers. Sothasil smiled. They were fighting their fear admirably. The chief proctor, Thargalith, came running from the arbor arches. Sothasil, Amalexia has arrived on Artaeum. The Yachisis told me to fetch you. Sothasil turned to Thargalith for only a moment, but he knew instantly from the screams what had transpired. The Nord lad Welig had not cast the spell properly and was burning. The smell of scorched hair and flesh panicked the other students who were struggling to get out of the basin, pulling him with them, but the incline was too steep away from the entry points. With a wave of his hand, Sothasil extinguished the flame. Welig and several other students were burned, but not badly. The sorcerer cast a healing spell on them before turning back to Thargalith. I'll be with you in a moment, and give Amalexia the time to take the road dust from her train. Sothasil turned back to the students, his voice flat. Fear does not break spells, but doubt and incompetence are the great enemies of any spellcaster. Master Welig, you will pack your bags. I'll arrange for a boat to bring you to the mainland tomorrow morning. The sorcerer found Amalexia and Iachesis in the study, drinking hot tea and laughing. She was more beautiful than he had remembered, though he had never before seen her so disheveled. Wrapped in a blanket, dangling her damp, long black tresses before the fire to dry. At Sothasil's approach, she leapt to her feet and embraced him. Did you swim all the way from Morrowind? He smiled. It's pouring rain from Skywatch down to the coast, she explained, returning his smile. Only half a league away, and it never rains here, said the Yachisis proudly. Of course, I sometimes miss the excitement of Somerset, and sometimes even the mainland itself. Still, I'm always very impressed by anyone out there who gets anything accomplished. It is a world of distractions. Speaking of distractions, what's all this I hear about a war? You mean the one that's been blooding the continent for the last 80 years, Master? Asked Sothasil, amused. I suppose that's the one I mean, said Iachesis with a shrug of his shoulders. How is that war going? We will lose it unless I can convince Sothasil to leave Artaeum, said Amalexia, losing her smile. She had meant to wait and talk to her friend in private, but the old Altmer gave her the courage to press on. I have had visions. I know it to be true. Sothasil was silent for a moment, and then looked at Iachesis. I must return to Morrowind. Knowing you, if you must do something, you will, sighed the old master. The Sijik's way is not to be distracted. Wars are fought, empires rise and fall. You must go, and so must we. What do you mean, Iachesis? You're leaving the island? No, the island will be leaving the sea, said Iachesis, his voice taking on a dreamy quality. In a few years, the mists will move over Artaeum, and we'll be gone. We are counselors by nature, and there are too many counselors in Tamriel as it is. No, we will go and return when the land needs us again, perhaps in another age. The old Altmer struggles to his feet and drained the last sip of his drink before leaving Sothasil and Amalexia alone. Don't miss the last boat. The year continues in Second Seed. That was 2920 Rain's Hand. Next is 2920 Second Seed, Volume 5. Second Seed, Book 5 of 2920, The Last Year of the First Era, by Karlovac Townway. 10 Second Seed, 2920, The Imperial City, Cyrodiil. Your Imperial Majesty, said the potentate Versidue-Shai, opening the door to his chambers with a smile. I have not seen you lately. I thought perhaps you were indisposed with the lovely Rija. She is taking the baths at Mir Korup, the Emperor, Riemann III said miserably. Please come in. I've reached the stage where I can only trust 3 people. You, my son the Prince, and Rija, said the Emperor petulantly. My entire council is nothing but a pack of spies. What seems to be the matter, Your Imperial Majesty? Asked the potentate Versidue-Shai sympathetically, drawing close the thick curtain in his chamber. Instantly all sound outside the room was extinguished, echoing footsteps in the marble halls and birds in the springtide gardens. I've discovered that a notorious poisoner, an Orma tribeswoman from the Black Marsh called Kachika, was with the army at Karasuvio while we were encamped there when my son was poisoned, before the battle at Bodrum. I'm sure she would have preferred to kill me, but the opportunity didn't present itself, the Emperor fumed. The council suggests that we need evidence of her involvement before we prosecute. Of course they would, the potentate said thoughtfully. Particularly if one or more of them was in on the plot. I have a thought, Your Imperial Majesty. Yes, said Riemann impatiently. Out with it. Tell the council you're dropping the matter, and I will send out the guard to track this Kachika down and follow her. We will see who her friends are and perhaps get an idea of the scope of this plot on Your Imperial Majesty's life. Yes, said Riemann with a satisfied frown. That's a capital plan. We will track this scheme to whomever it leads to. Decidedly, Your Imperial Majesty, smiled the potentate, parting the curtain so the Emperor could leave. In the hallway outside was Versudushai's son, Severian Chorak. The boy bowed to the Emperor before entering the potentate's chamber. Are you in trouble, father? Whispered the Akaviri lad. I heard the Emperor found out about what's-her-name, the poisoner. The great art of speechcraft, my boy, said Versudushai to his son, is to tell them what they want to hear in a way that gets them to do what you want them to do. I need you to get a letter to Kachika and make certain that she understands that if she does not follow the instructions perfectly, she is risking her own life more than ours. 13 Seconds C, 2920, Mir Korab, Cyrodiil. Rita sank luxuriantly into the burbling hot spring, feeling her skin tingle like it was being rubbed by millions of little stones. The rock shelf over her head sheltered her from the misting rain, but let all the sunshine in, streaming in layers through the branches of the trees. It was an idyllic moment in an idyllic life, and when she was finished, she knew that her beauty would be entirely restored. The only thing she needed was a drink of water. The bath itself, while wonderfully fragrant, tasted always of chalk. Water, she cried to her servants. Water, please. A gaunt woman with rags tied over her eyes ran to her side and dropped a goat skin of water. Rija was about to laugh at the woman's prudery. She herself was not ashamed of her naked body when she noticed through a crease in the rags that old woman had no eyes at all. She was like one of those Orma tribesmen Rima had heard about, but never met. Born without eyes, they were masters of their other sentences. The Lord of Mir Korab hired very exotic servants, she thought to herself. In a moment, the woman was gone and forgotten. Rija found it very hard to concentrate on anything but the sun and the water. She opened the cork, but the liquid within had a strange metallic smell to it. Suddenly, she was aware that she was not alone. Lady Rita, said the captain of the Imperial Guard. You are, I see, acquainted with Kachika? I've never heard of her, stammered Rita before becoming indignant. What are you doing here? This body is not for your leering eyes. Never heard of her when we saw her with you not a minute ago, said the captain, picking up the goat skin and smelling it. Brought you Navis Ichor, did she? To poison the Emperor with? Captain, said one of the guards, running up to him quickly. We cannot find the Argonian. It is as if she had disappeared into the woods. Yes, they're good at that, said the captain. No matter, though. We've got her contact at court. That should please His Imperial Majesty. Seize her. As the guards pulled the writhing naked woman from the pool, she screamed, I'm innocent! I don't know what this is all about, but I've done nothing. The Emperor will have your heads for this. Yes, I imagine he will, smiled the captain, if he trusts you. 21st Second C, 2920, Gideon Blackmarsh. The Sow and the Vulture Tavern was the sort of out-of-the-way place that Zook favored for these sorts of interviews. Besides himself and his companion, there were only a couple of old sea dogs in the shadowy room, and they were more unconscious from drink than aware. The grime of the unwashed floor was something you felt rather than saw. Copious dust hung in the air and moving in the sparse rays of dying sunlight. You have experience in heavy combat? Asked Zook. The reward is good for this assignment, but the risks are great as well. Certainly I have combat experience, replied Mira more haughtily. I was at the Battle of Bodrum just 2 months ago. If you do your part and get the Emperor to ride through Doza Pass with a minimal escort on the day and the time that we've discussed, I'll do my part. Just be certain that he is not traveling in disguise. I'm not going to slaughter every caravan that passes through in the hopes that it contains Emperor Riemann. Zook smiled, and Miramore looked at himself in the Kothringi's reflective face. He liked the way he looked, the consummate, confident professional. Agreed, said Zook, and then you shall have the rest of your gold. Zook placed a large chest onto the table between them. He stood up. Wait a few minutes before leaving, said Zook. I don't want you following me. Your employers wish to maintain their anonymity if by chance you are caught and tortured. Fine by me, said Miramore, ordering more grog. Zook rode his mount through the cramped labyrinthine streets of Gideon, and both he and his horse were happy to pass through the gates into the country. The main road to Castle Gioves was flooded, as it was every year in springtide, but Zook knew a shorter way over the hills. Riding fast under trees drooping with moss and treacherous slime-coated rocks, he arrived at the castle gates in 2 hours' time. He wasted no time in climbing to Tavia's cell at the top of the highest tower. What did you think of him? Asked the Empress. He's a fool, replied Zook. That's what we want for this sort of assignment. 32nd Seed, 2920, Thurzo Fortress, Cyrodiil. Rita screamed and screamed and screamed. Within her cell, her only audience was those giant grey drones, crusted with moss but still sturdy. The guards outside were deaf to her, as they were deaf to all prisoners. The Emperor, miles away in the Imperial City, had likewise been deaf to her cries of innocence. She screamed, knowing well that no one would likely hear her ever again. 31st of 2nd Sea, 2920, Cavus Rim Pass, Cyrodiil. It had been days, weeks, since Tralla had seen another human face, Cyrodiil or Dunmer. As she trod the road, she thought to herself how strange it was that such an uninhabited place as Cyrodiil had become the imperial province, seat of an empire. Even the Bosmer and Valenwood must have more populated forests than this heartland would. She thought back. Was it a month ago, too, when she crossed the border from Morrowind into Cyrodiil? It had been much colder then, but other than that, she had no sense of time. The guards had been brusque, but as she was carrying no weaponry, they elected to let her through. Since then, she had seen a few caravans, even shared a meal with some adventurers camping for the night, but met no one who would give her a ride to a town. Tralla stripped off her shawl and dragged it behind her. For a moment, she thought she heard someone behind her and spun around. No one was there, just a bird perched on a branch, making a sound like laughter. She walked on and then stopped. Something was happening. The child had been kicking in her belly for some time now, but this was a different kind of spasm. With a groan, she lurched over to the side of the path, collapsing the grass. Her child was coming. She lay on her back and pushed, but she could barely see with her tears of pain and frustration. How had it come to this? Giving birth in the wilderness all by herself to a child whose father was the Duke of Mournhold. Her scream of rage and agony shook the birds from the trees. The bird that had been laughing at her earlier flew down to the road. She blinked, and the bird was gone, and in its place, a naked elf man stood, not as dark as a Dunmer, but not as pale as the Altmer. She knew at once it was an Aelid, a wild elf. Tralla screamed, but the man held her down. After a few minutes of struggle, she felt a release and then fainted away. When she awoke, it was to the sound of a baby crying. The child had been cleaned and was lying by her side. Tralla picked up her baby girl, and for the first time that year felt tears of happiness stream down her face. She whispered to the trees, "Thank you," and began walking with the babe in her arms down the road to the west. The year is continued in MidYear. Okay, next up is 2920 MidYear Volume 6. This will bring us halfway through the 2920 series. MidYear, Book 6 of 2920, The Last Year of the First Era, by Karlovac Townway. 2nd of MidYear, 2920, Balmora Morrowind. The Imperial army is gathered to the south, said Cassier. They are 2 weeks' march from Ald-Ilval, and Lake Coronati, heavily armored. Vivek nodded. Ald-Ilval and its sister city on the other side of the lake, Ald-Malak, were strategically important fortresses. He had been expecting a move against them for some time. His captain pulled down a map of southwestern Morrowind from the wall and smoothed it out, fighting a gentle summer sea breeze wafting in from the open window. "They were heavily armored, you say?" asked the captain. "Yes, sir," said Kassir. "They were camped out near Bethel Grey in the Heartland, and I saw nothing but ebony, dwarven, and daedric armor, fine weaponry, and siege equipment." "How about spellcasters and boats?" asked Vivek. "A horde of battle mages," replied Kassir, "but no boats." "As heavily armored as they are, it will take them at least 2 weeks, like you said, to get from Bethel Grey to Lake Coronati." Vivek studied the map carefully. They'd be dragged down in the bogs if they then tried to circle around to Aldmarach from the north, so they must be planning to cross the straits here and take Ald Eoval. Then they'd proceed around the lake to the east and take Aldmarach from the south. "They'll be vulnerable along the straits," said the captain, "provided we strike when they are more than halfway across and can't retreat back to the Heartland." "Your intelligence has once again served us well," said Vivek, smiling to Kassir. "We will beat back the Imperial aggressors yet again." 3rd of MidYear 2920, Bethel Grey, Cyrodiil. "Will you be returning back this way after your victory?" asked Lord Bethel. Prince Julek barely paid the man any attention. He was focused on the army packing its camp. It was a cool morning in the forest, but there were no clouds. All the makings of a hot afternoon march, particularly in such heavy armor. "If we return shortly, it will be because of defeat," said the prince. He could see down in the meadow the potentate for Sidhu Shai paying his lordship's steward for the use of the village's food, wine, and whores. An army was an expensive thing, for certes. "My prince," said Lord Bethel with concern, "is your army beginning a march due east? That will just lead you to the shores of Lake Coronati. You'll want to go southeast to get to the straits." You just make certain your merchants get their share of our gold," said the prince with a grin. "Let me worry about my army's direction." 16th of MidYear 2920, Lake Coronati, Morrowind. Vivek stared across the blue expanse of the lake, seeing his reflection and the reflection of his army in the cool blue waters. What he did not see was the Imperial Army's reflection. They must have reached the straits by now, barring any mishaps in the forest. Tall, feather-thin lake trees blocked much of his view of the straits. But an army, particularly one clad in slow-moving, heavy armor, could not move invisibly, silently. "Let me see the map again," he called to his captain. "Is there no other way they could approach?" "We have sentries posted in the swamps to the north in case they're fool enough to go there and be bogged under," said the captain. "We would at least hear about it, but there is no other way across the lake except through the straits." Vivek looked down again at his reflection, which seemed to be distorting his image, mocking him. Then he looked back on the map. "Spy," said Vivek, calling Kassir over. "When you said the army had a horde of battle mages, what made you so certain they were battle mages?" "They were wearing grey robes with mystical insignia on them," explained Kassir. "I figured they were mages, and why else would such a vast number travel with the army? They couldn't have all been healers." "You fool," roared Vivek. "They're mystics schooled in the art of alteration. They cast a spell of water breathing on the entire army." Vivek ran to a new vantage point where he could see the north. Across the lake, though it was but a small shadow on the horizon, they could see gouts of flame from the assault on Aldmarach. Vivek bellowed with fury, and his captain got to work at once redirecting the army to circle the lake and defend the castle. "Return to Dwinnen," said Vivek flatly to Kassir before he rode off to join the battle. "Your services are no longer needed nor wanted." It was already too late when the Morrowind army neared Aldmarach. It had been taken by the Imperial army. 19th of MidYear 2920, the Imperial city, Cyrodiil. The potentate arrived in the Imperial city amid great fanfare, the streets lined with men and women cheering him as the symbol of the taking of Aldmarach. Truth be told, a greater number would have turned out had the prince returned, and the Sidhu Shai knew it. Still, it pleased him to no end. Never before had citizens of Tamriel cheered the arrival of an Akaviri into their land. The Emperor Riemann III greeted him with a warm embrace, and then tore into the letter he had brought from the prince. "I don't understand," he said at last, still joyous but equally confused. "You went under the lake." "Aldmarach is a very well-fortified fortress," explained the potentate. "As, I might add, The army of Morrowind has rediscovered, now that they are on the outside. To take it, we had to attack by surprise, and with our soldiery in the sturdiest of armor. By casting the spell that allowed us to breathe underwater, we were able to travel faster than Vivek would have guessed. The weight of the armor made less by the aquatic surroundings. And the attack from the water-bound west side of the fortress, where the defenses were at their weakest. Brilliant, the Emperor crowed. You're a wondrous tactician, Vrisidushai. If your fathers had been as good at this as you are, Tamriel would be Akaviri domain. The Potentate had not planned to take credit for Prince Julek's design. But, on the Emperor's reference to his people's fiasco of an invasion 216 years ago, he made up his mind. He smiled modestly and soaked up the praise. 21st of MidYear 2920, Aldmeric, Morrowind. Severian Chorak slithered to the wall and watched through the arrow slit the Morrowind army retreating back to the forest land between the swamps and the castle grounds. It seemed like the ideal opportunity to strike. Perhaps the forest could be burned and the army within them. Perhaps with Vivek in their enemies' hands, the army would allow them possession of Ald Eoval as well. He suggested these ideas to the prince. What you seem to be forgetting, laughed Prince Julek, is that I gave my word that no harm to the army or to their commanders during the truce negotiations. Do you not have honor during warfare on Akavir? My prince, I was born here in Tamriel. I have never been to my people's home, replied the snake man. But even so, your ways are strange to me. You expected no quarter and I gave you none when we fought in the Imperial Arena 5 months ago. That was a game, replied the prince, before nodding to his steward to let the Dunmer battle chief in. Julek had never seen Vivek before, but he had heard he was a living god. What came before him was but a man, a powerfully built man, handsome, with an intelligent face, but a man nonetheless. The prince was pleased. A man he could speak with, but not a god. Greetings, my worthy adversary, said Vivek. We seem to be at an impasse. Not necessarily, said the prince. You don't want to give us Morrowind, and I can't fault you for that. But I must have your coastline to protect the Emperor from overseas aggressions and certain key strategic border castles such as this one, as well as Ald Umbale, Tel Arin, Ald Lambasi, and Tal Mothriva. And in return? Asked Vivek. In return, laughed Severian Chorak. You forget we are the victors here, not you. In return, said Prince Julek carefully, there will be no Imperial attacks on Morrowind unless in return to an attack by you. You will be protected from invaders by the Imperial army, and your land may expand by taking certain states in Black Marsh, whichever you choose, provided they are not needed by the Empire. A reasonable offer, said Vivek after a pause. You must forgive me, I am unused to Cyrodiils who offer something in return for what they take. May I have a few days to decide? We will meet again in a week's time, said the prince, smiling. In the meantime, if your army provokes no attacks on mine, we are at peace. Vivek left the prince's chamber, feeling that Almalexia was right. The war was at an end. This prince would make an excellent emperor. The years continued in Sun's Height.